I've worked security for years, and I thought I'd seen it all. Fights, break-ins, drunk vandals, even a guy trying to climb an elevator shaft because he was looking for a shortcut. Nothing really rattled me anymore. Or at least, that's what I believed until the night I met the man behind it. It happened at Ridgeway Corporate Towers, a high-rise complex filled with law firms, tech offices, and fancy conference rooms no one used after sunset. During the day, the building looked impressive. Polished marble floors, wide glass windows, and an immaculate garden plaza outside. At night, though, it was another world entirely. Silent, hollow, echoing, with every reflective surface showing empty corridors stretching into nothingness. Night shifts were lonely but straightforward. Walk, observe, report. I clocked in at 10 p.m. and did my usual check of the lobby. Lights steady, elevator doors clean, no suspicious activity. I took the elevator to the 15th floor, where most of my rounds were scheduled. That floor had recently been vacated by a legal firm that had abruptly relocated to another city. The floor was technically inactive, but my boss told me to keep an eye on it due to valuable documents still being stored in the file rooms. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open with a faint screech. The entire floor smelled faintly of old paper and carpet glue. The lights overhead flickered, not enough to go out, but enough to feel wrong. I walked down the hallway, tapping my flashlight absently against my thigh. The office doors were all glass with frost pattern etchings, making every room look like it was filled with white fog. About 15 minutes into my shift, I passed one of the large corner conference rooms, the one with floor-to-ceiling glass facing the hallway. Something caught my attention. At first, I thought it was my reflection, distorted by the light. But then it moved. There was a man standing inside the dark glass-walled room. He had his back to me at first, facing the far corner of the room. He wore a long, dark coat, old-fashioned, like something from the 1940s. His posture was stiff, arms at his side, head tilted very slightly downward. He didn't move when I stopped walking, didn't acknowledge me, didn't react at all. "Sir," I called out, knocking lightly on the glass. "This floor is closed. You're not allowed to be here." No movement, no sound. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. How had he gotten in? Every door required a key card, including the emergency stairwell. The building had an after-hours security lock that would have alerted the front desk if breached. And yet here he was, standing so still he could have been a mannequin. I took out my radio. "Dispatch, this is Johnson on 15. I've got a possible trespasser in conference room 15C, requesting confirmation on any scheduled maintenance or late workers." Static. Then, "Negative, Johnson. That floor is empty. Shouldn't be anyone up there but you." My skin crawled. I approached the glass slowly, bringing my flashlight up. The beam hit the window, and instead of illuminating him clearly, the light distorted. It bent around him, like shining a flashlight through fog. His silhouette stayed perfectly dark, even though everything else in the room brightened under my beam. "Sir, turn around," I said, louder this time. Nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked. Standard. The keycard panel blinked red when I swiped mine. Every other room on this floor was accessible to security, except this one. My boss told me it had been locked for years, even before the law firm moved in. The man's head turned. Not all the way. Not like a normal person. It moved in a slow, jerking motion, like his neck was stiff or resisting. He turned just enough that I could make out part of his profile. A cheek, part of a jawline. But no eyes, just darkness where his eyes should have been. Like someone had carved hollow sockets and filled them with shadow. My breath caught in my throat. Then he smiled. A thin, unnatural stretch of lips, far too wide for a human face. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to step back instead. "Dispatch, I need backup now." "Johnson, copy. Sending Mark up." Mark was another guard, older guy, ex-military, unshakable. Knowing he was coming made me feel a little less alone, but not by much. The man behind the glass took one slow step toward the window. Not a normal step. It was as if he slid across the floor, his coat swaying behind him, though there was no breeze. His shadow stretched unnaturally across the room, long and thin like ink spreading across water. I backed up farther, keeping my eyes locked on him. 5 steps. 6. 7. His face pressed closer to the glass, but the features remained wrong. Like someone had smeared a charcoal drawing of a face on a fog glass. The radio hissed again. "Mark's on the way. Are you safe?" I swallowed. For now. That was when the man behind the glass raised his hand. It was thin, almost skeletal, long fingers with sharp joints. He placed his palm flat onto the interior of the glass. A faint smudge formed, darkening the window. But it didn't look like a handprint. It looked like the glass itself was rotting under his touch. Then tap. Just once. A soft tap from inside the room. I stumbled backward. "Where the hell are you, Mark?" The figure tilted his head downward, like he was studying me. His smile widened. Then his fingers began tapping. Slowly, methodically, like Morse code. Tap, 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 tap. My stomach twisted. There was meaning behind it. I felt that deep in my bones. The elevator dinged behind me, making me nearly jump out of my skin. Mark stepped out, heavy boots echoing. "All right, what's so damn urgent?" He stopped when he saw the figure. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Can you unlock the room?" I asked, voice shaking. Mark shook his head. "I've worked security for more than 13 years, mostly at quiet places. Parking lots, storage units, office buildings where nothing ever happens. But the building I was assigned to 2 years ago, the Easton Research Annex, was different from the start. Even the guy who trained me, an older guard named Briggs, kept calling it the dead building. At first I thought he meant it was boring, but after my first week I realized he meant it in a far more literal way. The air inside always felt stale, as if it hadn't been circulated in years. Some rooms were too cold without explanation. Some were too warm. And sometimes when you walked past certain hallways, you felt like you were intruding on someone or something that didn't like being disturbed. But I stayed because the pay was excellent, the hours were steady, and night shifts gave me time to think, which I always believed was a good thing. I was wrong. Thinking too much is exactly what ruined everything. Thinking let me notice too much. Noticing too much is what woke whatever was inside that building. My shift was always 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The kind of hours where the world outside goes silent, where any noise inside the building suddenly becomes magnified and important. The building was shaped like a horseshoe with multiple wings branching off the main corridor. Most of it was empty, half-renovated research labs, offices with covered equipment, and entire sections shut down for upgrades that never seemed to happen. The whole building was supposed to become some kind of biotech research center, but funding stalled, leaving the place in permanent limbo. That meant I was often the only person inside the entire 3-story facility. The isolation didn't bother me at first. I've worked worse, but the annex had a way of making you feel watched, even when you were absolutely sure you were alone. The first strange sign happened during my 3rd week. I was sitting in the security office watching the monitors, sipping my coffee, when a motion trigger alarm for Wing C went off, specifically Corridor C13, which they told me nobody was allowed to enter because of ongoing electrical repairs. I radioed dispatch, called it in, then switched cameras to check. The hallway was pitch black except for the red exit sign at the far end, glowing faintly. I waited for the motion indicator to go off, but it stayed flashing. And then something moved just at the edge of the camera's frame. Not a person, not in any normal way. It was like a shape, a shifting darker darkness, sliding along the wall. My first thought was a raccoon, or maybe a bird trapped in there, but then the alarm system chimed 3 more times in rapid succession. Motion detected, motion detected, motion detected. All same corridor, all within seconds. I turned up the CCTV brightness, leaned closer, and froze. Something was standing beneath the exit sign. Not a person, at least not a whole person. It looked tall and thin, like a stretched shadow. It wasn't fully formed, more like smoke trying to imitate a human shape. And then as I watched, it turned its head toward the camera. I can't explain how a shape without features can look directly at you, but it did. I hit record on the monitor. The screen flickered, white static, then went completely black. When the image returned 2 seconds later, the hallway was empty. The motion alerts stopped. The temperature in the room dropped so fast, I saw my own breath. I told Briggs about it the next morning. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he didn't even look confused. He just sighed like he'd been hoping I wouldn't mention anything. "Don't stare at the cameras too long," he said quietly, pouring himself coffee. "That wing catches reflections. Tricks the mind." I asked him if someone ever died in the building, maybe during construction, maybe during research. He shook his head, but it was too quick, too defensive. "Just focus on the areas that are occupied. Let the empty ones stay empty." That was his final answer. I should have listened. 2 nights later, the alarm went off again. Wing C, same hallway. My stomach twisted as the monitor switched to the feed. The camera flickered like before, but this time the hallway lights were on, dim but on. The exit sign blinked irregularly. The corridors seemed longer, stretched somehow, as though the camera had changed angles on its own. Then I saw something else. On the far wall near room C13, there were handprints. Dozens of them, some small, some large, all smeared like someone dragged their hand across the surface. They weren't there the night before. The building was empty. There was no way anyone got access to that corridor. My hand hovered over the radio. I wanted to call it in, but something inside me whispered not to. A quiet pressure in my skull, like a headache forming behind the eyes. It told me to just watch. So I did. I watched the hallway for almost a minute, feeling more uneasy with every second. Then the lights flickered. A fast pulse, dark light, dark. When they came back on, something stood halfway down the corridor. Thin, leaning slightly, almost bent. Its limbs were long, too long. It stood perfectly still as if waiting. The camera zoomed slightly, unprompted. I jerked backward in my chair. The figure's head twitched. Not a natural movement, more like a puppet jerk. And then it moved. Not walking, not gliding. Almost like it shifted through frames of motion, teleporting closer, inch by inch, each flicker bringing it forward. I slammed the monitor controls to switch cameras. When the feed changed, the hallway was empty again. My radio crackled. "Control to Unit 4. You good?" The static distorted the voice. I grabbed my mic. "Yeah, I'm here." False alarm. Camera glitch. The voice on the radio paused. "You sure? We saw your feed drop." "Just a glitch," I repeated. And for reasons I still don't understand, I muted the channel afterward. I told myself it was stress, lack of sleep, imagination. But deep down I knew that thing had really been there, watching me, moving toward me. A part of me wondered if it knew I was the only one watching. Maybe it wanted that. Over the next weeks, things only escalated. The alarms from Wing C came more frequently, sometimes 3 or 4 times a shift. Sometimes the motion sensors triggered in order, like something walking slowly down the hallway. I stopped checking the camera feed every time. They told us not to overreact to system malfunctions, but eventually curiosity always won. And each time, the figure appeared closer, clearer, less like smoke and more like flesh made of shadow. The building itself started acting strange too. Doors on floors I wasn't patrolling opened by themselves. Cold spots formed near the stairwells. Once I heard faint tapping from inside a locked lab, soft, rhythmic like fingertips on glass. Another night, I heard whispering voices vent through the air ducts. Always too faint to distinguish words, but loud enough that I knew they were real. Electrical outages started happening too. Short, sudden ones that lasted only seconds but plunged entire wings into darkness. During one outage, I swear I heard footsteps approaching down the hallway outside the security office. Slow, deliberate steps. I opened the door, flashlight raised, but the hallway was empty. Except, I could still hear the footsteps receding into the distance, even though nobody was there. I started drinking more coffee, trying desperately to stay alert. I stopped turning off the office lights. I've worked security long enough to know when a building has something wrong with it. Not maintenance wrong, not structural wrong. Wrong in the bones, wrong in a way that makes your instincts tighten even if your brain can't figure out why. The Holloway Commerce Tower was that kind of wrong from the moment I stepped inside. It was an older high-rise downtown, built sometime in the 70s, and the company that hired me had been contracted to watch it overnight while some corporate transition was happening. During the day, it was filled with realtors, clerical workers, and investors evaluating office spaces. But at night, the tenants were gone, the elevators powered down, the lights dimmed to emergency settings, and all that was left was me and 52 floors of echoing emptiness. My station was in the lobby, a modernized area with polished floors, LED signs, and a sleek security desk. The rest of the building didn't match the lobby, at least not after the 10th floor. The higher you went, the more the place seemed to rot into something older, stranger, and less human. The walls changed color. The lights hummed louder. Some floors had fixtures from the early 80s that should have been replaced decades ago. But I didn't question it. The contract paid well, and they promised it would only be for 3 weeks while the tower transitioned ownership. My job was simple: patrol floors 1 through 20. Do not go above floor 20, the supervisor had said. Upper floors are sealed for renovation. When I asked why they needed guards if the floors were sealed, he just repeated, "Stay below 20. That's the rule." And that was that. I thought it was weird, but not weird enough to turn down a good paycheck. For the first few nights, everything felt normal. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that puts you in a trance. So quiet that sometimes the smallest sound, a dropped pen, a faucet dripping, would echo through entire hallways. But around night 4, I started hearing faint noises from the floors I wasn't assigned to patrol. At first, it was just creaking, the kind old buildings make when they settle. But then it became footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps. They came from above me, specifically from floor 21. I know the floor numbers because I counted. The first time I heard it, around 2 a.m., I checked the stairwell door expecting maybe a homeless person had clawed their way inside. But when I opened the door, the stairwell was silent. Still, the footsteps continued overhead, steady and slow, one step every few seconds. I even leaned my head against the railing to listen more closely and felt the vibrations of weight shifting on the concrete slab above. Something was definitely walking. I radioed it in. Dispatch told me, "No one should be up there. Floors 21 to 52 are locked off and inaccessible. Do not go investigate. Do not use the elevator above 20. Their tone made my skin crawl. Not worried, not skeptical, warning. Like they already knew about the footsteps. Like this had happened before. The next night, floors 17 through 20 felt colder. Not AC cold, bone cold like drafty basement cold. My breath didn't fog, but my arms prickled with goosebumps every time I walked those floors. The lights flickered slightly whenever I stepped out of the elevator. Not enough to call maintenance, just enough to notice. And always, the footsteps overhead. Around 1 a.m., around 3 a.m., around 4:30 a.m. Never fast, never running. Always slow, always deliberate. One night, I tried to record the sound on my phone, but the audio file came out completely silent, as if the noise never happened. That was when I first considered quitting. But I convinced myself I was imagining things. Stress, lack of sleep, too much caffeine, ghost stories born from boredom. But then floor 19 changed everything. It was near the end of the second week when I first heard the knocking. I was doing my patrol route, walking down the main hallway of floor 19, when something behind me tapped on the wall. Not loud, just a soft, distinct knock. I turned around. Nothing was there. No door nearby. No pipes. The wall didn't even have utility access behind it. The blueprint in the security office clearly showed empty space. Then the knock came again, louder this time. 3 taps, like someone politely asking for attention. I backed up a little, flashlight raised. I don't know why I called out. Maybe instinct, maybe stupidity, but I said, "Who's there?" The hallway swallowed my voice whole. Everything stayed quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Then something knocked again, once slowly, as if answering. I felt something tighten in my ribs. This wasn't an echo, wasn't pipes cooling, wasn't an animal. It was purposeful, intelligent, and coming from the wrong side of the wall. I stepped back toward the elevator and pressed the call button. The doors took forever to open. When they finally did, a cold rush of air blew out of the elevator car. The overhead light inside flickered twice and then stabilized. I stepped in and hit the button for the lobby. But instead of descending, the elevator jerked upward. My stomach lurched. I slammed the lobby button again and again. Nothing. It kept rising. Floor 20. Then, floor 21. My heart hammered. The display had a faint, glitchy glow, as if the numbers were being forced to display something they hadn't shown in years. The elevator stopped. Doors slid open. A chime rang. A soft, distorted ding that sounded warped, like audio played backward. Floor 21 shouldn't have been accessible. Yet there it was. And the floor was wrong in a way I still don't have words for. The hallway outside the elevator was dark, except for one flickering ceiling light far down the corridor. All the walls were a faded yellow-green color, stained and peeling. The carpet was an ugly pattern from the 1970s, threadbare and darkened with something I hoped was just age. The air smelled old, rotten, like wet books and mold. And the worst part? It was silent. Completely silent. Not even the hum of electricity. No AC, no buzzing lights, nothing. Dead quiet. I shouldn't have stepped out. Every instinct screamed at me to stay inside the elevator. But something about the hallway felt almost magnetic. I don't mean literally. I mean in that subtle human way, like something behind me was pushing me forward, or something ahead was pulling. I stepped out. The elevator doors closed behind me immediately. No chime, no warning. Just shut tight. I spun around and jabbed the call button. The button's light flickered, but didn't turn on. The elevator doors didn't open. My breath hitched. The silence pressed against my ears like cotton. I was alone on a floor that technically didn't exist anymore. I reached for my radio. Dispatch. This is Unit 7. I'm on floor 21. Elevator malfunction. Requesting manual override. Static. Then more static. Then something else. Underneath the static, a